My own brother held a board meeting behind my back, so I terminated his contract and removed him from the company we built together. Not a stranger. Not an employee. My brother. If you like true stories that hit the heart and redefine loyalty, subscribe, because here's exactly how it happened. I never imagined the man I shared a childhood bedroom with would one day try to push me out of my own business. We survived poverty together, dreamed together, and turned those dreams into a company that fed hundreds of families. I trusted him more than any lawyer, accountant, or investor. I thought blood was the safest contract a man could sign. But betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the person who stands closest, because that's the only way they can reach your back. One December morning, I walked into the office and learned a board meeting had been held without me. Decisions made. Documents signed. Power shifted. Quietly. Secretly. Like I didn't exist. That was the moment I stopped being naive. And the moment my brother learned what happens when loyalty turns into greed. The morning it all began didn't feel like the beginning of a war. That's the thing about betrayal, it rarely arrives with thunder. It comes quietly, on days that seem peaceful. I was in my office early, before sunrise, the way I'd done for more than 30 years. At 66, most men are retired or slowing down. But I never learned how to sit still. Building something from nothing becomes part of your blood. You don't step away from it, not if you poured your life into it. The building was quiet, the halls dark except for the soft glow of exit signs. The smell of fresh coffee drifted through the air, and the only sound was the hum of the heating system kicking on against the winter cold. This company had been my second home longer than my actual home. Sometimes I felt like the walls themselves knew me, every late night, every early morning, every fight to keep the doors open during the bad years. I sat at my desk and looked at the framed photographs on the shelf. One of them showed my brother and me standing outside our first warehouse, me in a cheap suit too big for my shoulders, him in work boots and a grin so wide it looked painted on. The ground was muddy, the sign was crooked, and we were young enough to believe nothing could break us. Back then, all we had were calloused hands, borrowed tools, and a stubborn belief that we could build something better than the lives we came from. We worked side by side, day in and day out. I led the contracts, the planning, the finances. He managed crews, suppliers, workers. Different roles, same mission. Family and business, woven together like rope. I remember those days with a painful kind of affection. The nights we'd sleep in the office because we were too exhausted to drive home. The morning he split the last cold sandwich with me because we didn't have money for two. The pride in our mother's eyes the first time she saw our company name on a truck. Those memories were the foundation of everything we built. So when people ask if I ever suspected he'd betray me, I tell them the truth. No. I trusted him completely. Some men guard their businesses with lawyers and contracts and suspicion. I guarded ours with blood. Because to me, family was the strongest security in the world. Or at least, I believed that. On that particular morning, I was reviewing payroll reports and planning our next expansion. A new facility upstate. Bigger warehouse, more staff, more opportunity. I had already imagined calling my brother into my office to show him the plans. He always liked the idea of growth. Outside the window, the sun was just starting to rise, painting the sky a soft orange. Workers trickled into the building, greeting me with nods and, "Good morning, sir." Some of these employees had been with us for decades. They trusted me. They trusted us. That meant something to me. Nothing seemed wrong. No tension in the air. No sign of trouble. If someone had told me that morning that my own brother was already making plans to cut me out of the business, I would have laughed. I would have sworn on my life he'd never do such a thing. But betrayal doesn't announce itself. It hides inside the people we love most, waiting for the moment we stop looking over our shoulder. And I wasn't looking. Not at family. Never at family. Which is why, when the truth finally hit me, it didn't feel like business. It felt like a funeral. Looking back, the signs were there, small cracks in the foundation I was too loyal to notice. It started with little things. Missed calls. Meetings my brother excused himself from without explanation. Long conversations in the hallway that went silent the moment I walked by. At first, I thought it was stress. We were expanding, taking bigger contracts, hiring more people. Growth comes with pressure, and pressure can make anyone act strange. But this was different. One afternoon, I walked into the break room and found two board members whispering over a stack of papers. When they saw me, they scrambled to shove everything into folders. They smiled too quickly, like criminals pretending to be tourists. "Everything all right?" I asked. They nodded, too fast, too nervous. "Just budget notes," one said. "Nothing urgent." They left without finishing their coffee. That night, my brother called, but not to talk about the company. He started asking odd questions. "Do you ever think about stepping back? Wouldn't retirement feel good? Don't you want more time with grandkids?" He tried to make it sound casual, but his tone was rehearsed. Like a man who already made a decision and was searching for permission. I brushed it off. He was my brother. He'd earned the right to ask tough questions. But the next week, he skipped 3 strategic meetings in a row, meetings he never missed. When I asked where he'd been, he gave vague answers, with suppliers, or handling paperwork, always with his phone turned face down. Employees noticed, even if they didn't say it. They started looking at him differently. Then they started looking at me differently, cautious, guarded, like they knew something I didn't. The worst sign came on a Tuesday morning. I was reviewing invoices in my office when I heard my brother arguing with someone in the hallway. Not loud, but tight. Tense. Words like timeline, vote, and he won't agree floated through the door. When I stepped outside, the voices stopped. He and a consultant I'd never seen before stood there stiff as statues. "Everything okay?" I asked. My brother smiled a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just planning ahead." "Planning what?" I didn't push. Trust is a blinding thing. You think loyalty protects you from harm. You forget that loyalty also makes you slow to question. Then came the strangest moment of all. One of our longest employees, a man who'd worked with us for 19 years, pulled me aside after a team meeting. His voice shook. "Sir, be careful." He wouldn't say more. Wouldn't explain. Just walked away like a man who'd said something dangerous. That night, I sat alone in the office long after everyone left. The building was dark, the air cold, and my thoughts colder. I opened the original partnership agreement, the one my brother and I signed when we made the company official. I read every word, slowly, like a man searching for a prophecy. Majority ownership, mine. Final authority, mine. Board meetings, cannot be held without my presence or written approval. A sense of unease settled in my chest, a quiet warning. I had spent decades protecting the company from external threats. Competitors. Market crashes. Lawsuits. I never imagined the danger would come from my own blood. But I pushed the thoughts away. Told myself I was being paranoid. After all, family doesn't betray family. At least. That's what I believed. Until the day I walked into the office and realized the betrayal wasn't coming. It had already happened. The day everything unraveled didn't start with shouting. It started with silence. When I arrived at the office, the parking lot was packed, too many cars for a weekday morning. I walked inside and felt an unfamiliar tension in the air. Employees avoided my eyes. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. It was the kind of silence that grows from guilt. I walked past the conference room and froze. Through the glass walls, I saw the entire board seated around the table. Contracts spread across the polished wood. My brother at the head of the table. A projector screen lit up with charts and projections I had never seen. The meeting was already in progress. My meeting. My company. Without me. For a moment, my mind went blank. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shocked. I felt something worse, hollow. Like every organ inside me disappeared all at once. I pushed the door open. Every head turned. Papers shuffled. Chairs shifted. The air felt heavier than concrete. My brother didn't look surprised. That was the first wound, he expected me to find out. "Morning," I said. My voice sounded foreign, like someone else was speaking through me. Did I miss an invitation? He smiled, a tight, guilty smile. We were just discussing future directions. I walked closer, reading the documents upside down. Budget reallocations. Leadership restructuring. Proposals for new executive authority. All signed. All approved. All without me. The partnership agreement was printed in front of him, pages highlighted. The section about my authority had been marked in red pen, circled, and annotated like a school assignment. "What is this?" I asked. He leaned back in his chair, confident in a way that made my stomach twist. "We've been talking," he said. "The board feels the company needs younger leadership. You've earned the right to retire. We were just formalizing the transition." "We?" I repeated. "You mean you." He didn't even deny it. "Someone had to make a hard decision. You've been slowing things down." A murmur rippled through the room, people uncomfortable, afraid to choose a side. I looked around the table. Some board members avoided eye contact. Others stared at me with a mix of pity and shame. I had mentored half the people sitting there. Given them opportunities. Carried them through downturns. And yet here they sat, approving a plan to replace me like a worn-out tire. I turned back to my brother. "You held a board meeting without me?" He shrugged. "It was easier that way." It was a simple sentence, but the knife in it was sharp. "I trusted you," I said. "I trusted you with everything." "And you got comfortable," he replied. "Business isn't about sentiment. It's about growth." There it was, the confession. Not shouted, not emotional, just cold. He wanted the company without me. I picked up one of the signed documents. The ink was fresh. Every signature a betrayal sealed in blue pen. "You do realize this is invalid?" I asked quietly. "You can't hold a board meeting without the majority shareholder present." His expression flickered, only for a second, but I saw it. Fear. He'd expected me to walk in defeated, to beg, to accept the decision like an old man who'd finally lost his place in the world. But I didn't build the company on fear. I built it on resilience. I placed the paper back on the table. This meeting never happened. Every vote is void. Every contract invalid. You broke the agreement. He stood abruptly, voice rising. "You can't do this. You can't control everything forever." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "I don't need to. The contract controls you." The room went silent. Not a breath. Not a cough. Just the hum of the projector and the heavy weight of consequence settling over every person there. My brother's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Because he knew I was right. Legally. Professionally. Morally. He had gambled everything. And lost. I turned to leave, stopping at the doorway. "Enjoy the rest of your meeting," I said. "It will be the last one you ever attend in this building." Then I walked out. Not fast. Not emotional. Just steady. Because in that moment, I stopped being the brother who forgave everything. I became the man who built the company. And I was done letting someone else try to steal it. Long before the boardroom, the contracts, and the polished office building, there was a shed. A leaking, crooked shed behind my mother's house. We started there because we didn't have anything else. I remember the first night clearly. Rain tapping on the tin roof, 2 dim work lights flickering, and a single table we built from scrap lumber. I was in my late 20s, hands blistered from my day job, eyes burning from exhaustion. My brother was still in school back then, tall, skinny, full of opinions and dreams. We didn't have investors. We didn't have employees. We had a borrowed power drill and a bucket full of stubbornness. Our first job was building cabinets for a neighbor. They paid us in cash, half up front, half after delivery. When we finished, the cabinets were a little uneven, the stain too dark, the lines not perfect. But the neighbor hugged me and said, "It's a start." Those words stayed with me. We didn't know it then, but that shed was the seed of the company. As the months passed, customers told friends, friends told family, and suddenly we were busy. I quit my construction job. My brother dropped out of college to work full-time with me. We weren't making good money yet, but we were making progress. Every dollar went back into supplies. We ate cheap meals and slept on old mattresses. But we were proud. When our father passed, I remember standing at his funeral, hands shaking, heart torn apart by grief. My brother stood beside me, and after the burial he said, "Let's make this company something he would have been proud of." We meant it. 2 years later, we rented our first warehouse. A small space with cracked floors and a broken heater. We couldn't afford insulation that winter, so we worked in gloves and thick jackets. Our breath hung in the cold air like fog. Every morning, we prayed the old machinery would start. Every night, we swept sawdust off the floor and told ourselves it would get easier. It didn't. Not at first. We nearly went bankrupt 3 times. Clients pulled out. Suppliers threatened lawsuits. We took whatever jobs we could get, fences, benches, repairs, anything that paid. We didn't take days off. Birthdays, holidays, weekends, they all looked the same: work, sweat, hope, repeat. But we survived. Because we did it together. The turning point came when a developer saw our work and took a chance on us. 1 contract turned into 5. 5 turned into 20. We hired our first employee, then 10 more. Trucks with our logo began driving across the city. Our mother cried the first time she saw one. My brother and I didn't just sign paperwork, we built something real. Something earned. Something no one thought 2 boys from a poor family could accomplish. That's why his betrayal cut deeper than business. He didn't just attack my position, he attacked the history that made it possible. There's a photograph on my office wall, the day we opened the first official headquarters. I'm wearing the same suit I got married in because I couldn't afford a new one. My brother is standing beside me, arm around my shoulder, smiling like we had conquered the world. Back then, love wasn't complicated. Trust wasn't a choice. It was automatic. We didn't use lawyers to protect ourselves from each other. We used loyalty. And I held on to that loyalty long after he let go. Some people say brothers fight. They say siblings clash. They say business makes monsters out of good men. But betrayal doesn't come from ambition alone. It comes from forgetting who helped you climb. I didn't build the company for money. I built it for legacy. For family. For a future where neither of us would struggle the way we did as kids. So when he held that meeting without me, it wasn't a business decision. It was wiping away every sacrifice we ever made. And in that moment, standing alone in the conference room he tried to steal, I knew something with painful clarity. If he could forget the past so easily, then I had to protect the future. Not just from strangers. But from him. After that boardroom ambush, I didn't go home. I didn't yell. I didn't confront anyone. I went into my office, closed the door, and sat in the dark with the blinds shut. I needed silence, the kind that lets a man hear his instincts again. Around midnight, I finally turned on my computer and opened our internal financial system. The first thing I saw wasn't just unauthorized activity, it was a blueprint of betrayal. My brother hadn't acted alone. Over the past 6 months, he'd been preparing for this. There were consulting invoices paid out of a discretionary account, large ones, to firms whose names I didn't recognize. Legal retainers. Market projections. Branding discussions. All approved by a board vote. A vote I was never told about. Then I found something worse, emails. Dozens of them. My brother emailing executives behind my back. Convincing board members that I was getting old, losing sharpness, resisting growth. Painting me as a relic who needed to step down. He wasn't just planning to replace me. He was rewriting the narrative, turning me into the obstacle. Scrolling deeper, I discovered contracts drafted under my name, contracts I never saw, never signed, never approved. Plans to acquire a new facility. Plans to change leadership structure. Plans to reduce my shareholder control. They forged my approval. My chest tightened. Not like anger. Like grief. Because betrayal from an enemy is strategy. Betrayal from a brother is abandonment. I kept reading. There were messages to attorneys discussing how to ease the founder out gracefully. Notes about optics and public sympathy. A timeline for a leadership transition that would present him as the visionary, and me as a tired old man stepping aside. He was staging a coup. Not loudly. Not suddenly. Quietly, with smiles and handshakes and rehearsed lines. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. My hands shook, but not from age, from rage held still. For a moment, I remembered sharing food from the same plate because we were too poor for two. I remembered him standing next to me at our father's grave saying we'd never abandon each other. I remembered every promise, every handshake, every late night. And then I remembered the conference room full of signatures. That was when the heartache hardened into clarity. I printed everything, every email, every invoice, every contract. It took 2 hours, and the machine spat out page after page like a confession spilling onto the floor. At 3 a.m, I called our corporate attorney. He answered half asleep. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said. "But it will be." I brought him every document. He skimmed, then stopped, eyes wide. "This is worse than a breach of trust," he said. "This is sabotage." He flipped through highlighted clauses, pointing out legal violations. Unauthorized board action. Fraudulent signatures. Misuse of company funds. Attempted hostile takeover. All punishable. All documented. Then he handed me a pen. "You can end this," he said. "Cleanly. Legally. Permanently." The next morning, I returned to the office early again. The world outside was quiet, streets covered with frost. But inside me, something had changed. For decades, I ran the company with fairness, patience, and heart. I gave second chances. I believed family deserved grace. But grace isn't a shield for betrayal. I walked into my office, opened the safe, and pulled out the original shareholder agreement. The same one my brother signed without hesitation because he never imagined needing protection from me. It was airtight. Majority ownership, me. Full executive authority, me. Power to remove a partner for breach of contract, me. He had built a plan on the assumption that I would suffer quietly. He forgot who I was. I spent the entire day preparing the termination documents. Legal language. Financial separation. Asset freeze. Removal from corporate accounts. Lockout from systems. Revocation of titles. Every signature I placed on those papers was a funeral for the version of him I used to love. That evening, workers began leaving the building. Lights turned off room by room. Soon the office was silent again, the kind of silence that settles just before a storm. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot, at the company trucks, the loading docks, the warehouse lights in the distance. We started with nothing. We built everything. And now he had tried to steal it. As I stood there, my phone rang. It was him. No greeting. No remorse. "We need to talk," he said. "No," I replied. "We don't. We can solve this like adults." "You made the first move," I said. "Now you'll see the last one." He laughed, forced, mocking. "You think you can run this place without me?" I paused. Not because I doubted myself, but because it hurt to hear how arrogant he'd become. "I ran it before you," I said. "I can run it after you." He cursed at me. Accused me of being afraid of change. Said I was killing the company. But the truth was simple. He wanted the throne without building the kingdom. When the call ended, I didn't feel anger. I felt done. I signed the final page of the termination documents and placed my pen down like a gavel. The betrayal wasn't a wound anymore. It was a verdict. He wanted a company without me. So I gave him a life without it. The next morning, I walked into the building with a folder under my arm and a decision carved into stone. The receptionist greeted me the way she always did, warm smile, fresh coffee, but when our eyes met, I saw something else. Concern. Maybe fear. Rumors travel fast in a company. Truth travels quietly behind it. I didn't stop to talk. I headed straight to the legal office on the third floor. My attorney, Marcus, was already waiting. His tie wasn't even straight, he'd rushed to get there. "Are you sure?" he asked as soon as the door closed. "Yes." He looked at me for a long moment, searching my face. "He's your brother." And he stopped being my partner the moment he tried to erase me. Marcus opened the folder, reviewing the documents I had signed the night before. The termination clause, the asset freeze, the revocation of executive privileges. This wasn't a reaction, it was a plan, clean and lawful. I built this company with my hands, but I protected it with my mind. Every contract, every policy, every safeguard existed for one reason. So no one could steal what I spent a lifetime building. Not even blood. We walked to the boardroom together. The same room where my brother had tried to stage his quiet coup. Now, it would become the place his plan died. The board was already seated, sensing something was coming. Some avoided my gaze. Others looked relieved. Everyone loves a leader until trouble asks them to choose a side. My brother arrived late, confident and smiling, like a man walking into his own coronation. He took his usual seat, leaned back, and folded his arms. "Let's be efficient," he said. "We have business to move forward." I placed the folder on the table. "We do," I replied. "Yours." He frowned. "What is that?" Instead of answering, I opened the folder and slid the termination paperwork across the table. His name, printed in bold letters, stared up at him like a sentence. "Effective immediately," I said, "your contract is terminated." At first, he laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "You're joking." "No." He grabbed the papers, scanning with frantic eyes. His face drained of color. "You can't do this." "I'm the majority shareholder," I said calmly. "I can." The board watched in stunned silence as he flipped through each page: termination of employment, termination of executive authority, removal from the board, freeze of company accounts, transfer of all company assets held in his name. "You can't fire family," he whispered. You stopped being family when you forged my approval. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. This is extreme. We are partners. I've been here for decades. And in 6 months, I said, you unraveled everything we built. He looked to the board, desperate. Are you really going to let him do this? But no one said a word. One member cleared his throat. You acted without the founder's consent. Everything you did was illegal. Another added softly, you betrayed the company, not just him. My brother slammed his fist on the table. This is a setup. No, I said. This is accountability. He stood, pacing, running a hand through his hair. His voice shook. You can't just erase me. I helped build this place. You did, I agreed. And I paid you fairly for every year of it. But you don't get to steal what you didn't create. He pointed at the board members. You used to respect me. We respected the man you used to be, I said. Not the one who tried to replace me in secret. The room fell silent. Then I pressed the intercom. Security. 2 guards entered, professional, calm, not rough but firm. My brother stared at them like he couldn't believe what was happening. You're escorting me out? He asked. Yes. His voice cracked. You're really doing this? I gave you decades of loyalty, I said. You gave me 6 months of betrayal. He looked like he might collapse, but pride held him upright. He gathered his things with trembling hands and moved toward the door. Before he left, he turned around. You'll regret this. I didn't blink. I regret trusting you longer than you deserved. The door shut behind him. For the first time in months, the room felt safe again, like someone had opened a window and let poison air escape. Marcus turned to me. It's done. No, I said. Not yet. Because firing him wasn't enough. He had access to accounts. He had login credentials. He had influence. And he had spent months preparing to take the company. So I spent the next 48 hours reversing every trace of his involvement. All passwords changed. Bank accounts secured. Clients notified. New authorization structure implemented. His name removed from every internal document. By Monday morning, he no longer existed in the corporate world. What shocked me most wasn't how easy it was to remove him. It was how quiet it felt after. No shouting. No threats. No chaos. Just paperwork and signatures. That's the thing about legal revenge, it doesn't need noise. It needs proof. And I had plenty. Days later, word spread through the company. People approached me privately, employees who had been afraid to speak. They told me they knew he was plotting. They showed me emails where he hinted at changes coming. They apologized for staying silent. I didn't blame them. Betrayal makes cowards out of many, and survivors out of others. One evening, as I walked out of the building, I saw his parking spot empty, the metal plaque with his name removed. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt like mourning. Because I hadn't just fired a business partner. I had buried a brother. And the grave wasn't in the ground. It was in the silence he left behind. 3 days after his contract was terminated, he showed up at my house. No warning. No phone call. Just the sound of tires crunching across the gravel driveway and a fist pounding on my front door. I opened it, and there he stood, eyes wild, hair unkempt, wearing the same suit from the day he was escorted out. It looked slept in. Wrinkled. Defeated. We're talking, he said, pushing his way inside before I could answer. I didn't stop him. I just closed the door and followed him to the living room. He paced the floor, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. How could you do this to me, he spat. After everything we've been through? I sat down slowly. You know why? No, he snapped. I don't. I tried to grow the company. I tried to modernize it. You resisted every idea, every suggestion. You're stuck in the past, and you're dragging the business with you. So that was the story he told himself: ambition, not betrayal. Vision, not greed. You didn't push for change, I said. You pushed for control. He stopped pacing and turned toward me, eyes burning. Because I deserved it. I put my life into that company too. But you always acted like it belonged only to you. It did, I said. Before you even knew how to read a balance sheet, I was mortgaging houses and begging banks to believe in us. You walked into a legacy. I built one. He flinched like I'd struck him. You don't own hard work, he muttered. I earned my place. You did, I agreed. And I rewarded you for it. But you wanted more. Not because the company needed it, but because your ego did. His voice rose. I made one mistake. One. I cut in. You forged signatures. You diverted funds. You lied to employees. You tried to vote me out of my own company. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Silence settled like dust. He sat down across from me, suddenly looking older, smaller. You ruined my life. No, I said. I stopped you from ruining mine. His voice dropped to a whisper. We're brothers. I looked him in the eyes. Then why didn't you act like one? He blinked fast, eyes glassy. For a moment, I thought he was finally going to apologize. But instead, he hardened again. You think this is over? People will hear about this. The board. Our employees. Everyone in this industry. You'll look like a tyrant who threw out his own family. They'll hear the truth, I said. They'll see the documents. The forged approvals. The secret meetings. He leaned forward. You think you're untouchable. But I will take you down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand. I just reached into the folder on the coffee table and pulled out a stack of papers, emails, bank transfers, consultant contracts, timestamps. I placed them in front of him. This is what will be presented to the board, the auditors, and the state. If you push this, if you try to fight, you'll lose more than a job. He stared at the papers like they were burning his hands. You wouldn't, he whispered. I would. And I have. He shoved the papers aside, stood up, and ran a shaking hand through his hair. You know what your problem is? You think loyalty is owed to you because you started the business. But once people get tired of your control, they look for a leader who listens. And you think that leader is you? I asked. I know it is. I stood, finally. Not angry. Not emotional. Just steady. Then build your own company. From nothing. With your hands. With your money. Without my name, my contacts, or my sacrifice. He stared at me with hatred and heartbreak tangled together. You're a cruel old man, he said. No, I replied. I'm the man who refused to be betrayed quietly. He took a step toward the door, then paused, voice cracking for the first time. I thought you'd forgive me. I swallowed, feeling something twist in my chest. I forgave you long before I fired you. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone stay. He looked at me like he didn't recognize the man standing in front of him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe grieving the loss of who we used to be was part of the price. He left without another word, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. Outside, the engine roared as he sped away, tires spraying gravel behind him. For a long time, I stood in the silence he left behind. Not triumphant. Not satisfied. Just done. That was the moment I realized something quietly devastating. You don't lose family in one day. You lose them the moment they choose power over blood. News travels fast in business. It travels even faster in family. Within a week, people started calling. Not to ask how I was, but to ask if the rumors were true. Some had heard my brother quit. Some said I fired him in anger. Some believed he left because I refused to modernize. No one knew the truth, but everyone had an opinion. A former employee emailed me saying I should be ashamed. A distant cousin sent a message accusing me of choosing greed over blood. A businessman we once partnered with called to ask if the company was collapsing. That's what betrayal does, it rewrites the story, paints the villain as the victim, makes the guilty look wounded. My brother leaned into that image. He told friends I humiliated him. He told relatives I forced him out after years of loyalty. He told anyone who would listen that I had become cold and cruel. And people believed him. For a while. But the board stayed silent, not because they feared him, but because the evidence spoke louder than gossip. Every document, every email, every signature was a quiet truth waiting to be revealed if he pushed too far. Inside the company, the mood shifted. Some employees mourned the loss. Others breathed easier. One afternoon, the operations manager, a man who had worked with us for 25 years, came to my office. He closed the door gently. "I need to tell you something," he said. "People are talking. Some are angry. Some are confused. But most of us, we support you." I looked at him, unsure if I heard correctly. He continued, "Your brother changed. The last year, he treated us like stepping stones. Not people. We followed you for decades because you respected us. We'd rather work for a company led by a man with a conscience than a man with an ego." It was the first moment of relief I'd felt since everything fell apart. But outside the company walls, the world wasn't as kind. At a family gathering, relatives whispered behind my back. A cousin approached me with a drink in his hand and said, "You could have handled this privately. Kicking him out was cruel." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Some people only understand a story after they feel its weight. Weeks passed, and my brother's life began to unravel. The consultants he hired sent invoices he could no longer pay. His company credit card, frozen. His health insurance, cancelled. The lifestyle he built on the company's success crumbled beneath him. Friends who once invited him to fancy dinners suddenly stopped answering calls. The people who cheered his leadership transition vanished when his power did. That's how fair-weather loyalty works, it dries up the moment the storm hits. One evening, I stopped at the grocery store, and an older woman approached me. She had worked in our warehouse years ago. "I heard what happened," she said. "Some folks say you went too far. But I remember when your brother fired 3 workers just to look impressive in a meeting. You're a good man. You always have been." She patted my arm and walked away before I could respond. Sometimes strangers see your truth clearer than family. The public noise eventually quieted. People moved on. But inside me, the damage lingered. I didn't celebrate. I didn't boast. I didn't feel victorious. Because winning against a stranger feels like triumph. Winning against your brother feels like losing something money can't replace. The company stabilized. We won new contracts. Employees worked harder than ever, determined to prove we could move forward. Investors trusted me. Clients stayed. The business survived. But every time I walked past my brother's empty office, I felt the echo of what used to be, 2 chairs side by side, 2 cups of coffee, 2 men who once had the same dream. Now, there was only one. The world believed I removed a partner. But the truth was quieter. I removed a traitor. And somehow, that hurt more. When the chaos finally faded, the world became strangely quiet. The phone stopped ringing. The whispers died down. The news moved on. But inside me, there was a heaviness I couldn't ignore. Justice had been served, the company was safe, and my brother was gone. Yet peace didn't arrive the way I expected. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing in the ruins of a house you spent a lifetime building. I buried myself in work for a while. Early mornings, late nights, contracts, audits, expansion planning. But as the weeks passed, I realized I wasn't running from trouble, I was running from grief. Losing a business partner is business. Losing a brother is something else. One evening, I left the office before sunset for the first time in years. I drove to the old workshop on the edge of town, the first real building we ever rented after the shed. The windows were dusty, the paint faded, but inside, the old workbenches still stood. I ran my hand along the wood and felt grooves carved by tools we couldn't afford to replace back then. So much history. So many memories. I sat down on a crate and let the silence surround me. Every mistake. Every sacrifice. Every moment of loyalty. It all lived in that room. For the first time since firing him, I cried. Not because I regretted what I did. But because the boy I stood beside in that shed had vanished long before the firing. We didn't lose each other in one board meeting. We lost each other slowly, when ambition grew louder than gratitude, when ego drowned out loyalty, when power seduced him into believing he deserved more than he earned. After that night, I made myself step back from the company a little, not retire, not disappear, just breathe. I went fishing with old friends. I took long walks. I rebuilt a wooden table for my daughter's house. I remembered who I was before business consumed everything. Slowly, peace returned, quiet, steady, honest. Months passed. Then one morning, last winter, a familiar car pulled into my driveway. He stepped out, but this time, there was no suit. No anger. No pride. Just a worn jacket and a man who finally looked tired of fighting. He didn't knock. He stood at the door until I opened it. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and led him to the kitchen. We sat across from each other, the same seats we once used to plan our future. He cleared his throat, voice rough. "I lost everything. I didn't speak. My house, the car, the bank accounts. People I thought were my friends disappeared. I couldn't find a job. Nobody wanted to hire the guy who got fired from his own family's business." There was no anger in his tone. Just truth. He took a shaky breath. "I can't change what I did. I thought I deserved more. I thought the company needed me in charge. But the truth is, I wanted power because I didn't know who I was without it." For the first time, his eyes lifted to mine. "I'm sorry." The apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And real was enough. "You broke my trust," I said quietly. "I know," he whispered. "But if you let me try. I want to be your brother again. Not your partner. Not your competitor. Just family." There are moments in life when anger wants to speak first. But age teaches you that bitterness only turns you into the thing you hate. I didn't hug him. I didn't tell him everything was forgiven. Some wounds don't close in one conversation. But I stood up, walked to the cupboard, and poured him a cup of coffee, the same way I had thousands of times in the workshop. "Sit," I said. "We'll figure it out." He cried. I didn't. In the weeks that followed, I helped him get back on his feet, not with power, not with titles, but with dignity. I found him work with a partner company. I gifted him an old truck we used years ago. I loaned him nothing. I handed him no shortcuts. He had to stand on his own, finally. And he did. We didn't become best friends overnight. Trust is rebuilt one quiet moment at a time. But every Sunday, he comes over for dinner. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we sit in silence. Sometimes we laugh, cautiously, like men who remember how joy used to feel. I didn't bring him back into the company. Some doors stay closed for good. But I gave him something more important. A second chance at being my brother. Not because he earned forgiveness. Because I earned peace. And peace is worth more than revenge ever will be. People ask if I regret firing him. If I regret taking legal action. If I regret ending the partnership we spent a lifetime building. I don't. Because loyalty without respect isn't loyalty. And family without honesty isn't family. For years, I believed blood protected us. That shared childhood memories would keep us united. That all the nights we worked in freezing warehouses, all the meals we skipped, all the sacrifices we made would mean something forever. But betrayal doesn't erase history. It just proves who stopped valuing it. When my brother held that board meeting behind my back, he didn't just break a contract. He broke the promise that started the company. A promise we made without lawyers or signatures, just two brothers shaking hands in a dusty shed. So, I did what a man is supposed to do. I protected what we built. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Out of responsibility. And in the end, it wasn't the firing that saved me. It was letting go of the version of my brother who no longer existed. The company survived. My dignity stayed intact. And he learned something no paycheck or title had ever taught him. Power means nothing without character. Today, we speak again, not as partners, but as men who finally learned the cost of ambition without loyalty. Our relationship is quieter, older, wiser. It's built on truth now, not assumption. If you've listened this far, thank you. And if you enjoy true stories where trust is tested, loyalty is earned, and consequences speak louder than betrayal, subscribe. There are more stories like this. Stories where family learns that love is not a free pass. Stories where respect matters more than blood. Stories where the people who think they can take everything are forced to face the one thing they never expected. A man who refuses to be broken.